Welcome to entry 6 in the never-ending parade of scripts labeled number 9 in my Google Drive. The last one even made it as far as getting filmed, but when I tried to transfer the videos off my phone to edit them, I'm not doing another take of this. They disappeared from the folder on my phone and never turned up in the folder on my computer. So that happened at about 3 p.m. last weekend. Then I went straight to bed and stayed there till morning. I missed a friend's birthday party. So that video was going to be a test of this composition method, which I hoped would make it easier to use the projector in videos without having to do a whole bunch of lighting shit. Lighting's really hard to do well, and while I have more lighting equipment than the average PhD student, it's still not very much, and I have also barely more than the average PhD student's amount of experience with lighting setups. And I still have to break it down after filming every time because my roommate also uses the living room, and I still have to, I don't have a second person who can be looking at the monitor to make sure that it looks right while I'm filming. And the thing is, if I do it this way, then I need to be way more prepared with my slides in advance, and I need to not go off script as often as I do when I'm recording, because sometimes there's particular phrasing that works for the way in which I am going to assemble the slides, and I'll forget that when I'm filming, and then I'll say it a little bit differently, and then the slides won't make sense when I try to put it together in post. So instead of that, I'm just going to use this method and refuse to give a fuck about how my lighting looks in these videos for at least a few weeks. I'm not even using any of my lighting kit. I'm just using the room lights and hoping it works out. I'm letting the phone do the adaptive lighting instead of locking the light levels, all that shit. Anyway, there are at least 4 major reasons why I've disappeared for if I film this the night that I wrote it and then edit it the next day and get it posted exactly 2 months. But I'm only ever going to talk about 2 of them on this channel, and only 1 of them in this video. So I've got a great big pile of mental health disorders, and I figured out last year that one of them is OCD. And I figured out this year that most of my problems can be traced directly to the OCD. And I don't think I have OCD worse than I have any of my other issues. Actually, compared to the case studies in the workbook I'm doing, I think my OCD is pretty mild. It's just, I think it's a survivorship bias thing. I've been pretty serious about working on my mental health for my whole adult life. So all of my issues that can be handled without directly addressing the OCD as part of it are pretty well handled. And everything that remains to be handled is, at least in part, the OCD. I'm not explaining the plane. It's on the Wikipedia page for survivorship bias, and there are 100 fun facts videos about it already. Anyway, the thing that I didn't understand about OCD until I read about it in a response to a Tumblr post about a young girl being haunted by a gif of a rotating cow is that the core mechanism underlying OCD is the inability to stop thinking something. Did you know that forgetting is an active process? We think of holding a thought as if it's holding a weight, where it's a persistent activity that you have to put effort into keep continuing to do. The fact that I'd be able to use them as a visual illustration here is the most compelling reason I've ever come up with to have free weights at home instead of just a gym membership. But it's we think as soon as you decide that you're gonna stop thinking the thought, then in that instant, you won't be. But that's not what happens. The thought persists on its own in your mind, continuing to play on a loop until your brain does something to put it down. Which I guess is a bit like holding a weight in the sense that you have to actively move your arm and then uncurl your fingers around it to allow it to fall to a surface. Or alternatively, you could just wait until your arm fatigues and your grip fails to get rid of it because your muscles aren't responding to the signals saying let it go. And if that were how you experienced weightlifting, even if it only happened some of the time, you might reasonably start avoiding lifting weights. Avoidance is, as it turns out, probably the most common response to OCD triggers, but that doesn't really show up very easily in diagnostic evaluation, so it's not the kind that gets a lot of attention. What gets attention is the more visible compulsions. Say you really don't want to stop lifting weights, so instead you start paying really close attention to what happens every time your arm locks up and trying to do things that you did when it didn't and avoid doing the things that you did when it did. Maybe before each rep you just lift it 1/4 of an inch and release it again. Maybe you only wear the same pair of socks every time you go to the gym. Maybe before each set, you have to walk counterclockwise around the weights while reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Maybe if you take a sip of water before your 11th rep of the day, you have to go home. People with OCD know the compulsions are irrational, but that doesn't make them go away. Like, that's the point. That's what OCD is the mechanism in your brain that would say you can stop thinking this because it doesn't make any sense, doesn't work right. So, let's talk about grad school and mental health. I've mentioned before, by the way, that I make each one of these videos for a particular person, and whether anyone else likes it is kind of secondary, if not irrelevant. This one's for me. I won't be reading the comments. These graphs are really rich text, actually, in terms of the shit that I research. They're from a longitudinal study, which means a study that took a long time, about the effects of grad school on student mental health. The x-axis on both graphs is years relative to PhD start. So, like, this line down the middle is 0. It's when the PhD program started, years before it. Like, all that is the past prior to getting into grad school. And everything on here is, like, number of years you've been in a program. Or number of years since you started a program, eventually you're not in the program anymore. The y-axis on both of them have this little triangle here. Triangle in psychiatric medication, triangle in hospitalization. The triangle is the Greek letter delta. And in the sciences, the Greek letter delta is used to mean change. So, change in psychiatric medication, change in hospitalization. And, like, I remember from high school chemistry the situations where, like, there are really particular equations where it makes a lot of sense to be able to represent the idea of change in a single character, but look at all this fucking white space. They could absolutely have fit the whole word. So why do you think they used delta here? Are they, like, trying to keep the contents of the paper secret, so they're using all of the secret science codes to make sure that it's illegible to lay people? Are they, like, just science virtue signaling? Are they trying to make it look like it belongs in a scholarly journal? No, they did it because it's fun. It's fun to know the secret codes and to use them in this special in-group way, even when you don't have to. In an incredibly small way, the use of delta instead of change in these graphs is a joke. To me, whichever one of the 4 authors of this paper types at these graphs, what that triangle says is that she loves that she gets to be a scientist. And of course she does, because look at these graphs. Like, I could spend the rest of this video talking about the little things about them that are going to be difficult or impossible for the uninitiated to read correctly, but big picture, these are really fucking good graphs. They nail the big picture. And the big picture is getting a PhD fucks you up. So why would she have put herself through all this if she didn't love being a scientist? Why would any of these 4 women have gone through the emotional and psychological meat grinder that is graduate level education and then devoted their careers to working on figuring out how to fix those problems if they didn't love it? People try to become scholars for the same reason that people try to become actors, musicians, and writers. It's not because it's a good career choice. With the exception of fields that have direct applications for the United States military, getting a PhD is buying a lottery ticket for a shot at winning an overworked and underpaid job that is also actually just a 5-year-long interview for getting the job you really want to get. And just 2 quick things for the STEM doctors currently foaming at the mouth about what I just said. 1, reminder that I'm not reading the comments on this video. 2, just real quick, go through your head, go through your, like, cohort when you got into grad school and count up how many of the people in that cohort are currently working for a defense contractor and how many of them are not working in the field at all. I very strongly suspect that one of those numbers is going to be too big to support your argument that I'm wrong about that. And if you're currently working on getting your very important and stable and lucrative STEM degree that you're dying to tell me about in the comments, before you do, ask your most condescending professor that question. Point is, grad school's really bad for you. It's been really bad for me. After a year of it, I figured out that I had OCD, and after 2 years, I figured out that it's making the OCD a lot worse. And I'm still trying to figure out the particular mechanics here, and how to communicate those mechanics to my professors, and what particular accommodations I need and should ask for, but I've figured out at least one underlying principle. And that is that the mechanics of the education system only have 2 things that they can tell you. You're not good enough, and no comment. I'm getting a PhD in communication on purpose And I'm not the only one. Everyone in my program is here in spite of all of the barriers and the great big filters, because we like doing this shit so much that we volunteered to do it for an extra 4 to 6 years in exchange for the opportunity to maybe get to do it for the rest of our lives. But every tool our professors have available to them to incentivize or evaluate our behavior assumes that the thing we need is to constantly be pressured to stop us from slacking off, cutting corners, neglecting our studies, and just generally operating out of a baseline contempt for the program and the career it means to prepare us for. Like, letter grades are an absolutely shit way of handling education in general, but at least K through 12 has the excuse that they're handling industrial quantities of non-consenting students. Structurally, there's no way for any of my professors to reward me for stopping when I've done enough or penalize me for doing too much. I think only some of them even realize that's a thing students might need to be taught to do. Structurally, the way that the tools available to them work, the only things that they can say to us mechanically within the institution is, don't forget to not do anything wrong and remember to always work as hard as you possibly can. Hey, you know what my brain's never not saying? Make sure to double check you didn't do that wrong. You're probably not working as hard as you can. You could keep working on this. You could keep working on this. You could keep working on this. There is nothing in my head that knows how to uncurl my fingers and let that thought go when my muscles start to burn. It only stops when I've pushed myself so hard that my body can't hold itself upright, and I'm not being metaphorical anymore. I have pretty strong ideological commitments to incompleteness, to not trying too hard, to letting people see incomplete or imperfectly polished work. In retrospect, I have started to realize that a lot of my ideological commitments are functionally coping strategies for OCD. And those strategies work pretty damn well, and for a lot of kinds of work, I have finely tuned mechanisms in my head for deciding that it's time to wrap it up and send it, even when my brain is still screaming, it's not done yet, you can't send it, over and over and over. But in grad school, I've been discouraged, when I'm not being outright prohibited, from using those methods, and instead I've been asked to substitute a methodology that rewards showing your effort and completeness and formalistic polish, and then that's evaluated in a system of communication that only has 2 messages, no comment, and you need to try harder. Forgive me for belaboring this metaphor, but grad school is like a personal trainer who says spotters are for pussies, and then doesn't understand why I'm scared to do bench presses now. That's it. That's the video.